If I'm starting out, I'm looking at developing today, what would be some good resources for me to really start getting an understanding of, what my cost per square foot's going to be?
I think that that's probably the number one question that we get. If you don't know what you're doing, you're just going to start throwing money everywhere, and it's not going to be organized. When you get to a point where you're real serious about it and we're going to design, let's do it. Let's get your layout put together.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Self-Storage Income Podcast. Today, we have a couple incredible guests hanging out with us today. Melissa, Hamish, thanks so much for joining us again. You guys are with the Forge Building Company. Fantastic company, fantastic products that you guys put out. We've done several projects with you guys. Couldn't be more excited to have you guys here to talk about self-storage development, not only as it relates to our projects, but what you're seeing in the market. Give us a really good understanding of the pulse you guys see, just being in this every single day, developing facilities, working with owners. Really, really excited to have you guys here today. So with that said, you guys want to just introduce yourselves a little bit, give a little bit of background for some of our new listeners.
I'm Hamish Bell. I'm the president of Forge Building Company. Forge Building Company specializes in building self-storage facilities.
Fantastic.
Excellent. I'm Melissa Anderson, and I'm an account executive at Forge Building Company. And like Hamish said, we are the steel building experts. We've been doing this for over 15 years. We have built over 60 million square feet of self-storage on over 500 projects in those 15 years.
That's incredible. And you guys are all over the country. You're not just specific to one area.
All over the country. We've built in Hawaii and Alaska.
Wow. That's amazing. I bet that Hawaiian was a doozy. That was probably a project.
It took a lot of logistics.
Holy moly. Yeah, that's something else.
Everything goes on a boat.
Yeah, exactly. That's incredible. That's incredible. Well, that said, let's kick things off. You guys are talking about, 60 million square feet, insane amount of storage being built.
A lot.
What are you guys seeing today in the development world and storage as it is? I know last few years it's been kind of hit and miss. We had the COVID era, then we had all the time after that, stimulus, all the things. There's been a lot of ebbs and flows with storage over the past just 3-4 years. It's amazing what's happened. What are you guys seeing right now today as far as development, demand, supply, some of those different elements?
Well, I can speak to what I'm seeing in the sales department. And I would say in the last 2 to 3 months, we have just seen almost a complete absence of requests for quotes. And so where we were getting a lot of requests for proposals or bids or quotes from GCs, a lot of those are just not coming in like they were. And so you can definitely tell that there's been a pullback on moving forward into the construction phase. Mm-hmm. Now, doesn't mean that they're not continuing on that development side, but I think, as you were saying, we were talking a little bit earlier, is that everyone's wanting to kind of hold off, and they're thinking like, well, we'll just hold off until we see that interest rate drop. If that interest rate drops, then that's going to make our numbers pencil out better. And so there is a lot of people that are just kind of on the fence right now. However, there's projects that are still penciling out. There are projects that are still moving forward. I think that it just gets tricky. And I think from Cedar Creek's point of view, you guys can totally see that on the pro formas that you're doing on trying to get it to work out. Mm-hmm. Construction costs, we're not getting a big break on those. Now we've seen some stabilization in the steel prices over the summer. However, as we know, it's a very volatile market and there's a lot of unpredictability. All it takes is one thing worldwide to happen, something like COVID, something that impacts that steel production, and then we would see that effect down the road in construction. So it's so hard to forecast, like, what are steel prices going to do? So then you start looking at other things. Well, what is the interest rate going to do?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
On steel prices, Forge Buildings work long and hard on being able to honour the price that we're putting out the door to our customers. Mm-hmm. We've tried to be a little bit, innovative and work on different ways of securing material before it's used and those sorts of things, so that we're not getting hit with those sudden increases that the manufacturers have been historically known for. We typically would get dealt with, order by this date, deliver by this date, your price is held. We've been able to, with just some things that we've worked on, we've been able to make those dates and promises stretch a little bit.
And that's by you guys going out and buying more of that supply and materials at that point in time, being able to have that on hand, kind of a deal.
Yep.
Well, and I think
Gotcha.
it's the buying power that we have and the relationships we've built over 15 years. And so like for instance, we had a situation where the price increases were really hitting the investors and developers hard when we were dealing with that COVID situation. Near the tail end, we were able to finagle a situation where we could lock in the steel price by buying the coil earlier or at that set price. Now, of course, there's lots of things to negotiate with that, but we were able to provide that solution to a couple of our projects.
Gotcha. That's fantastic because it really is, no matter what point in time, there's always a problem to solve, right? And to that point, I'm curious, what do the conversations look like when you have the investors, developers coming to you guys saying, hey, we're going to hold off, we're going to see how things go? What does that conversation look like for you guys, and what are you guys saying and hearing?
It's definitely taken the less how do I say this, the less sophisticated newer person into the industry. I think this is definitely a time that, you know, they're making different calls on what they're going to do with their money. So especially with the higher interest rates, they're borrowing at a higher rate. It's just for the less sophisticated new customer, I think it's a tougher decision than it has been in the past. So historically, when I've gone through these ups and downs, the big established companies are the ones that keep building. And so it's more of the jobs that are there are more likely to be real rather than, maybe someone's dream.
Right.
Absolutely. There's a big difference between first-time developers and those that they've done this before and they're adding to their portfolio. They have more resources and they're more creative on getting things to work out.
For sure. We've definitely seen that not only in the development side, but just in storage operations too, over the past several years with as competitive as everything has gotten, storage is not what it was even just 5 years ago from an operations and just general market standpoint, and a lot of the markets, especially that we own and operate. To some of those people who are actually just starting out, they're looking to develop, what would be some words of advice or wisdom from you guys to them on managing risk, on making sure things work, all of that? What are some pitfalls that you guys have seen? How does it work?
In my experience, and I think Hamish is going to have a different point of view, but I would definitely advocate for investing in the planning and design phase. And I think that is something that first-time developers try to cut out. They try to cut out that market feasibility study. They put pieces together. And it's really important that when you're working with that design team, that they understand what the budget is that you're looking for and what exactly are the parameters that they need to stay within. And so as you're doing that design, there are several things that you could incorporate or not incorporate into your design that will make a huge impact on the cost of that construction of that project. And so the first thing, as I'd say, definitely make sure you put in a lot of time into planning. It is going to take longer to develop the project than what you think. We have a lot of people that are like, yeah, I want to build this in 6 months. Great. Do you have a site layout? No. And, the reality is it just takes more time. I mean, you haven't even gone through the entitlement process. That alone has a lot of unknowns and variables. And so give yourself time. And then secondly, surround yourself with experts. If it is your first time, work with those that have done it a couple times, or bring somebody into your project that has the experience so you can learn as you're doing your first one. That would be my word of advice.
I agree. You have to go with people with tried and true experience. I don't think you can get enough experience on your team, even if you're established. You want. I always say it's probably quicker to build it, shovel in the ground to key in the lock, than it is to plan it, entitle it, permit it, all of those things, all of that paperwork, all of that planning, that typically takes longer than the shovel in the ground to key in the door.
Absolutely. But it makes a huge difference.
It does.
You put in that planning ahead of time, it is going to minimize the risks and the issues you're going to see when you're actually on the site. Now, not to say that you're not going to have some of those unknowns, but there's something to be said for taking that time to plan it out well and to have the right people on your team. If you're going to go with an architect or a structural engineer, make sure that they have experience in self-storage. If they don't understand self-storage, they are going to be basing their advice on what they know. And if you're building self-storage, get people on your team that understand it.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's a lot of our experience and what we've seen. And we can talk on our project that we've just recently gotten wrapped up with you guys, which is super exciting. But our Statesman, our store local Curtis location, I mean, I remember one of the first meetings that we'd had some drawings done. You guys came in, looked at them for 2 seconds and said, "Oh man, like the engineering here is like, I think it was the rebar or something. It was
the second floor mezzanine system that was used. It was a structural steel system, not a load bearing system on the division walls of the units, and so it was just a lot more economical to redesign that. It would have worked fine the way it was. It was just that you had a structural steel system to pour that floor on versus that load bearing light gauge division wall system. And at that point, it was really a decision that you guys, the developers, had to make because it was designed. I think it was ready for permit or in permit.
It was ready. I believe. Yeah.
And so that was obviously a delay, was to redesign it the way we proposed. But that involves weighing up multiple different things, you know. Do we proceed with what we've got, or do we change path right now, which takes time? But it did save money for sure.
Oh yeah, that was a large sum of money that whole redesign saved us.
And we see this quite a lot. We will see a set of structural drawings come through where they're permit ready, and absolutely the building is structurally sound. However, a lot of times we'll see these as over-engineered. So there's a lot more steel, or the way that they designed it is not the most efficient. And so just like we did with Cedar Creek, we will offer that to customers saying, okay, we can definitely bid this project as it is structurally designed. However, there could be a potential savings if you consider redesigning and letting us show you where you can save money. Where you have to weigh it is now you have to go through the permitting process again, or do a redesign or a revision to your permit, and you have to wait for the drawings to be done. It could be another 6 to 8 weeks. So if time is of the essence and you cannot delay like your opening target date, that may not make sense for you. It may actually end up costing you more. And so there's a lot of numbers to look at when you start saying, hey, can you redesign? Now, on the other hand of that, if you get the right design person in your structural engineer team that understands self-storage, they've designed self-storage all over the country.
Exactly.
They're going to be looking like they already know. They know that this is the most efficient design because it is what is being used by several different owners and developers.
There's so many just details that I don't think a lot of people coming in would really understand, whether it's over-engineering like you guys are talking about, or even unit mix and layout and how the units are designed within the structure itself, and access and all of just the little nuances that, you know, as a person that's, you know, not done it before, you wouldn't think of those things. When you guys are looking at property management software for your storage facilities, there's a ton of options out there, but no other option compares to Tenant Inc. Tenant Inc. is going to be your one-stop shop solution that has an amazing amount of tools that you can deploy at your fingertips to maximize the value of your facility, to operate it more efficiently, more effectively. They have an open API where you can back in almost anything you want. You own your data, and it's just an incredible solution. I can't say enough good things about these guys. Link is in the show notes. Be sure to check out Tenant Inc. What are some other, like over-engineering is definitely one of them that you guys touched on. What are some other pitfalls that you guys have seen as people are coming in trying to develop these storage facilities?
Sometimes I'll see layouts where there aren't units back to back. They'll just do like one row and it only has access on like one side of that unit. That means that there's paneling all along that hallway system. So sometimes I'll suggest like, hey, would you want to consider doing 2 doors? If this is a larger unit, have doors on both sides. Or is there a way that we can redo the layout so you have back-to-back units and still keep your unit mix? So there's sometimes that we'll look at.
Yeah, I think unit mix is probably going to be the biggest debated thing in self-storage from day one to the last day of self-storage. Yeah. It's you could ask 3 different people and you're going to get 3 different answers on unit mixes, but typically common sense, accessibility, and demand should be the things that drive those decisions. At the end of the day, it's the it's the person with the business plans that needs to make sense in their mind. But there is lots of strong advice out there. I think every market report or market analysis is going to be driven off vacancies and types of units demanded. So, yeah, definitely unit mix and layout to me is probably something that needs a lot of time and effort. But it also, I've been involved in multiple unit layouts that something new comes online that wasn't accounted for in the original. And so it totally changes it, which drives that change last minute, which no one seems to like, but you have to do it.
Yeah, all of a sudden you see that there's now a demand for climate control 10 by 30s.
Yep.
And you didn't have that in your original layout. Well, now we've got to figure out how to adjust that unit mix accordingly.
No, that's a really good point. And that's actually one of the huge benefits to being able to go in and develop is being able to identify that supply and demand for those certain unit types or product types that the market actually, ends up wanting. And we ended up doing that with our development down in Arizona just recently. I mean, we started...
Surprise?
Yep, exactly. Okay. We started off with, I think the thing was 3 stories. It started off at 4 stories, went to 3, now it's 1, the interior temperature control area. And, all of the exterior, because it's fortress style as well, all the exterior units, we ended up just totally revamping the unit mix just based on the demand and the changes in the market that we were seeing. And like you said, yeah, it's costly to go back and redo those things. But again, as you run the numbers and you're looking at it, you're thinking, well, is it more costly just to shift or to not have a facility filling up?
It's not as costly as a vacant unit.
Yeah,
exactly,
right. But again, that goes back to that planning. How much due diligence do you put in the very beginning so you have that confidence of, yes, this is the target unit mix we really want to hit because this is what I need the pro forma. Now, obviously, if unknowns pop up, then you adjust. But really, you want to have all that information going into your initial design. And I would say, and Hamish, you can let me know if I'm wrong, but one of the benefits of, when Forge does the structural engineering, when those changes happen, we're working real time with our engineer saying, oh, we need to make this shift. Or, hey, we just found out that there's a height restriction. We need to figure out how we can adjust this. Or so we're working with that architectural firm. We're working with the owner and we're changing the structural drawings at that same time. So when we are a part of that design team, it really allows us to be cohesive.
That's phenomenal. And how does that differ from other developers and stuff? I mean, your guys, you have a competitive edge, it sounds like, in that aspect of being able to work way more efficiently in that design and engineering phase. How are you guys different and what sets you guys apart in that aspect?
I would say that there's other steel contractors that will also offer steel or structural engineering. However, I think that one of the things that is really great about Forge is we have spent 15 years really investing into the most efficient design. And so we are working hand in hand with a structural engineer that understands our specific design, even down to the foundation. So Hamish has spent 15 years really fine-tuning our foundation design to be as efficient as possible. And so while there are going to be similarities in the post and purlin structural design, we do have some things that we bring to the table from our own experience.
Yeah, we don't design all of our projects like the U-Hauls, the public storages. Those guys, they come in with complete set of documents that we bid from. But they have full design. They're in the game, right? So they have specific things that they want, but we're more than comfortable build from those drawings. But definitely, when we get in early and we can help with the design, I think it's more of a clean process, collaborative process with civil engineering, architecture, MEP, the whole design package of the building. It takes collaboration from everyone. So being involved in that, I feel when we're needed to be involved in that early is key.
Yeah.
And I
agree.
think that, because we do GC select projects for customers and we have that experience, that also brings something to the table. Because even if we're just coming in as the steel contractor, we have that experience and we understand the big picture of things that are going on.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because I mean that project, like you said, it's not just a quick 6-month project. It can be years, right? Of just ongoing coordination, and there's a lot of moving pieces, especially in a lot of storage facilities these days. If it's temperature control,
Are you specifically talking about Curtis? Because
there's a couple things going on there. Yeah,
well, I think I look at how
project.
long the approval of every step of the way. It was through
permits was 9 months.
It was through COVID.
Yeah,
and
it's insane.
then we had to do deferred submittals for fire sprinklers, which took months on top of that, and finding a fire sprinkler, company that wanted to take it on, even though it was a building that I assumed had plenty of fire protection since they were protecting employees.
In a printing operation.
In a printing operation, yeah. But that was one of the things that, we really never got a clean start until that fire was out of the way and done. And that was a key trade to that type of building that is a retrofit building. You need to get that fire side of things sorted and organised and done as quickly as possible, even though it's deferred submittal after permit.
That's a really good point, that differentiation between what buildings, especially if you're going in and doing a conversion, what the building's current utilization is and code and everything versus storage. Because I know the weight capacity is also vastly different, even from like just parking storage and everything.
That's correct.
What are some tips and tricks in different observations that you guys have made that make storage different than other assets?
On conversions?
Yeah. Or just in general, where people think that, it's just storage. I can go in and slap it up and there's nothing to it kind of a thing. When it's like, in reality, no, you actually have to have X amount times more load-bearing capacity.
The things that are costing me time and money on projects are elevators. Elevators have long lead times. The elevators are definitely a lot of my schedules are built around the elevator install.
Oh geez. Yeah.
And electrical gear.
Electrical's still bad.
Electrical gear's been another one.
Interesting.
Also the fire code has been, we've had projects that have been designed, permitted, and then the inspector comes through and we've built per the design and what was permitted, but the inspector has the final say to be able to say, hey, that's not the way I interpret the code. I want it done this way. So then we have to go back through a resubmittal to the way that because he's basically not letting us proceed. And then we've had inspectors that have told us a non-conforming resolution that we're like, well, this can't be designed like this anywhere, but if that's what you want, we'll do it. So, definitely fire code, elevators, electrical gear have been, they've definitely been big, the critical path on projects.
Yeah, it seems like electrical gear has been a problem for years at this point.
Yes, it has been. I think that I went to the BOMA symposium earlier this year, and they were saying it was like a 72-week lead time in general for these electrical transformers that they were doing. And that was obviously for a much larger project, but you start building your schedule around what your longest lead times are, and say, okay, well, we're not going to be able to finish the project any earlier than this because the elevators aren't showing up. So you start working backwards on your schedule, and you're like, okay, we want to fast track this, but perhaps it doesn't make sense for us to start for another 6 months since we're waiting on the elevators anyway. So you start looking at that big picture, because what you don't want is this lull of waiting.
Do you guys see a lot of people doing like a temporary certificate of occupancy?
TCOs?
Yeah. And trying to
It depends on their approach, and it depends on the municipality, because the municipality may or may not let you do a TCO depending on how you go into permitting. So there are some developers that will choose to permit by the phase that they want to go into occupancy. So, hey, we're going to do these 3 buildings under one permit, and we'll do these under another permit. It all depends on how the jurisdiction is wanting you to submit it. And so that's a part of that planning phase of talking with that development project or development department or the construction building department. How can we best do this so we can start doing lease up? They'll let you know. They'll tell you whether it's an option or not an option or what they've seen. So it's having that conversation.
Yeah, there's not many of my customers that don't want the unit as quickly as they can get it.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah,
You
that's
want
kind of
money
common.
rolling in as quick as possible.
If TCO's the way to get it, then that's why we do get the TCO, because I've got a project myself that's got first floors wide open, and I'm waiting on the elevator inspections for the top 2 floors.
Yeah.
So
are you able to lease out your first floor?
First floor's being leased out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Offices open, still waiting on elevator.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Still waiting on stuff. No, that's a heck of a way to do it, and that's a really fantastic point, Melissa, about coordinating with the cities up front, especially. I know we talked a little bit about working with the experts in the field as it relates to engineering, architecture, the developer, contractors that you're using, all of those pieces. But that other piece that you'd mentioned is that connection with the city and those agencies that are dictating what's going to happen and not happen. Really having a good understanding of that is huge. I've heard just horror stories on horror stories of people having some kind of idea of how they're going to do something, going way down the road of trying to execute on that, only to find out that that's not only an impossibility, or it maybe a far in excess of the cost that they thought it would be to have to redo something. I mean,
really,
it's just unreal.
Those conversations should be happening during due diligence, during land acquisition. When you're making the decision to purchase the land for a self-storage facility, you should be talking and finding out. You need to, don't just assume because it's zoned commercial or zoned business that they're going to let you put in self-storage. You need to know what the acceptable land use is for that parcel. And so start having that discussion. Look at it. If it's not an acceptable use of land, is there a way to have that changed? Do you have to completely rezone? What does rezoning take? Every jurisdiction, every municipality is going to have a different type of process. What is the likelihood that they are going to let you rezone? Do they just have a hatred for self-storage and they're going to make it as difficult as possible? They may. So you need to kind of feel that out during that due diligence period, because the last thing you want to do is purchase this property, go into it, you start doing your entitlement, and you find out the city absolutely does not want you to build it. And I've had that happen on several projects. The city was I have one at Oroville where the city was adamant the only thing they wanted to go in that parcel was a grocery store. Even though it had the acceptable land use of other things, it didn't actually have self-storage, but they would not change their mind to allow self-storage. And so that project ended up being abandoned.
It's probably millions of those examples around the country.
Yeah.
Millions.
No,
but that saved the client money knowing that up front before purchasing.
Well, on your project, Connor, on the
Curtis one?
The Curtis project, the main building was basically broken into 4 different zones, and we tried working with the city to allow the zones to be opened individually under TCO, so you guys could get in there quicker. It ended up that because of the way that the fire system was being built, there was no way to isolate it on each zone without spending more money.
That's a doozy, huh?
Yeah, so it ended up, it really didn't save us a whole lot of time in the end, because we were coming through and we had all the subs there lined up ready to go as soon as the fire sprinkler sections were done. So, but that was one example of us trying to, knowing that you guys would have taken any section that we could give you.
Oh, for sure.
But just because of the the course of construction, it didn't pan out.
No, exactly. And one of the things we were grateful for is being able to get that RV section done over there, start leasing that up, because anything's better than nothing, right? So that was fantastic. That worked out really good. And talking on construction costs, I know we talked about this a little bit, but jumping into that in a little bit more detail, if I'm starting out, I'm looking at developing today, what would be some good resources for me to really start getting an understanding of, what my cost per square foot's going to be?
I think that's probably the number one question that we get people asking us is what is the general per square foot cost, not just for the steel building, but what are you seeing for GC costs? And that is a really hard thing to be able to just pull out. We have a general idea for our steel building numbers because we have a lot of historical information and we can put that together. When you start looking at what is it going to cost or what is it going to cost to GC the project, that varies so much from project to project.
Oh, for sure.
Just the variance of what your general conditions are going to be so different in different areas. Especially, and I just learned this last week, let's say that we're doing a project in an area that has a sports team or a college team. And we are doing hotels for our superintendent and such. We're now going to look at what that peak hotel is. So if you have a metropolitan area that things are just more expensive in general, even trades, it's going to cost more to GC a project in there. And I think we can kind of understand that. A project GC'd in Seattle is going to be very different from a project GC'd in Surprise.
We have a prime example of that here in Idaho, Sun Valley, working in Sun Valley and then working in this valley, Treasure Valley and Sun Valley.
That's the same state.
Lot of different zeros at the end of the Sun Valley one.
Well, and not to mention, how many trades do you have? If you have, a handful of concrete trades to choose from, you're probably going to be able to get more competitive pricing. If there's only a good 5 in the area.
Such good point.
So it's so hard. Now, you can work with general contractors. They can give you a ROM, which is the rough order of magnitude. They can kind of put some things together. But until you have those CDs, the construction documents put together, everyone's just kind of guessing based on assumptions. And that's where it gets real sticky when you give budgetary numbers.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense.
Right now, financing for real estate is really hard, even for self-storage. The markets are very challenging. Live Oak Bank is a specialist in financing for self-storage, including SBA loans. They are one of the leaders in financing all sorts of deals and deal size. We trust Live Oak Bank for their specialty in self-storage, their unique approach, and how they help their customers go through the process so there's no surprises. That in itself is a testament to their exceptional service and support. So whether you're looking to acquire, build, or expand a storage facility, Live Oak Bank has to be number one on your list to call. Click the link below right now so you can experience the difference that a dedicated self-storage partner can really make.
Talking to the Curtis project, that was a massive conversion. Appreciate all you guys' time and effort and energy on that. It's been delivered. We're leasing up. It's going fantastic. Development versus conversions, pros and cons of each.
For me, the conversions I like because they seem to come into an area that the city's more willing to work with you because they've lost the business use that was in the building. And so they're happy to have, something occupying the space. So you can tend to get a self-storage in an area where there's not a lot of competition. Also, you've got a roof and 4 walls if it's a perfect conversion. Depends on the amount of demo. A lot of demo in your building, Connor. That building was every ceiling.
A lot of demo.
Every ceiling, every wall, every floor, everything had to be touched inside there. Also, the roof had to be redone. So that was a lot more than some conversions. Not a lot more than all conversions, but definitely if you get a big box, it's got, nice 25-foot clear span. You go in with two units and you don't touch the roof, you don't touch the exterior walls. You do some access stuff and, that's a basic one. But there's not many more basic ones left.
I was going
You've
to
got to think outside the box.
You're creative now.
Yeah, you have to get creative on the space. So
Yeah, I would say that I think that a lot of people see conversions as the easier way to go because it's an existing building. But I think it's really important to remember, and I'm sure you guys can relate to this, that there are things that could come up, or it may not be the right fit. We were talking about the mezzanine at the Curtis location. If somebody wants to put a mezzanine in in a space that does have the adequate clearance, is the foundation going to be able to support that much steel? And so they may go into it thinking, oh yeah, there's a left room, we can do a second floor, we'll do a lift, all this good stuff. They do a core drill of the concrete and find out the concrete isn't structurally sound enough to hold that weight. So then that could completely transform, is this even an equitable deal?
Yep. No, that's such a good point. I remember that back in the day when we were looking at Curtis at the beginning, and even a couple other conversion projects. I've been out of touch a little bit on the development side for a couple of years now, but that was one of the biggest things when we were looking at any of those, is really just ensuring that the existing slabs would actually meet that requirement for storage, because it is so much heavier or such a higher requirement. And like you said, if you're not doing those things, it could absolutely kill a deal. You get in there, think you're going to do something, you get way down the road and finally figure out, actually, that's not a possibility.
Right. And wasn't there at the Curtis location, didn't we have to do like a break for earthquakes as well?
The
Seismic gap.
Seismic gap.
Yeah,
the majority
So-
of the conversions we do, unless they're a recently built building, we build a building inside a building that requires a seismic gap from the existing building, then we don't have to bring that building up to current codes.
Well, and that's another thing. Do you want to explain that a little bit more in detail on how that's achieved?
So yeah, basically we're leaving it's I think locally
6 to 8?
it's probably 6 to 8 inch gap between the existing structure and the new structure, because they're both being analyzed under different codes. Obviously the existing structure was an older code, the newer structure is the current code. So the easiest way to get around that is to just leave a gap between the two.
Do they treat them as like their individual structures for the earthquake?
They do, yeah.
Okay, so that's what the gap is in purpose of.
Because
Okay.
they'll move differently in an event.
Just an incredible way to again save a ton of cost, make something work that might not have before, and again getting creative. Maybe there's a building out there that some storage owner operator came along and it's like, oh yeah, it doesn't meet code and I can't, spend all the money to fix it up, but had no idea that it could, provide a seismic gap inside the existing structure, build a structure within it essentially, and you're off to the races.
Yeah,
that's a piece of gold.
Great use of an existing building that may not, its use may have run out.
I would also add to that if you're in a market that really sustainability is a really important value to that community, they are usually way into you reusing that building because it's eliminating waste, it's repurposing. And so to them, that's a way that you can even advocate that you're a green company in a sense. Look, we repurposed a building and we saved waste. And so if it's a community that really values sustainability, it's actually in your favor.
No, that's fantastic. And then just with you guys and being involved in storage, constantly, it's all you guys do. What are you guys seeing out there right now in the storage industry as far as just the different types of assets that people are building? Are things changing at all in any way? What are some of the big changes? I know here we talk a lot about building for the future. We don't build for today. And so just from your guys' perspective, what do you guys see out there as far as a lot of these new storage buildings being built?
I'm seeing a lot of diversifying into flex space and storage condos. And so they may also have their self-storage facilities. And this is kind of like a sister asset group because they're essentially kind of built with that light gauge framing.
Same construction method.
Yeah, same construction method. The flex buildings can be built with light gauge if the units don't span too much. Or you may opt to do something a little bit fancier where you have a clear span. So that would be a pre-engineered metal building, which we focus in on those as well. So I'm seeing a lot of interest in those.
Yeah, I've definitely seen the storage condominium market You know, we partner with LuxLocker and build all of their facilities nationwide with the steel building system, and they seem to be successful and keep growing into different markets, and a good partner of ours for sure.
Absolutely.
That's really
and I'm getting quite a few new inquiries, new development teams that are like, hey, we want to add this to our portfolio.
That's
I think
fantastic.
additions to additions to existing facilities are becoming much more strategic. Hey, we have
Gotcha.
outdoor parking parked here. What can we do? Those sorts of things. We're talking to some big companies regarding their expansion. I think Public Storage and NSA, correct?
Yeah, NSA is doing a huge. They spent 2023 focusing on acquisition of new parcels and new properties. And so 2024 is all about expanding those existing facilities and how can we capitalize on the land that we already have. And so I think that as you are getting to lease up, and if your business is doing really successful, it makes sense to kind of go that direction if you have the land to build on.
Absolutely. No, yeah. You squeeze all the juice you can, right?
Yeah, exactly. Where there's an opportunity sitting there. It's zoned. It's ready to go. It's a little simpler to add an addition than it is to go from the ground up.
For sure.
Absolutely.
No, that's super exciting. Talking a little bit to that, at the beginning of the podcast, we talked a little bit about how new people are coming into the market, what they're doing, what they're not doing, some of those different aspects. When you guys first start working with somebody, what does the process look like? Just to give somebody an idea of how everything kind of kicks off.
Melissa's the process queen. My process is not so clean.
This is a brand new investor, right? Brand new to it.
Yep.
So it kind of depends. We get two different types. We get, hey, I have this piece of land. So they've inherited it. They just own it. I'm thinking about doing this. Great. We have the other one that is like, hey, I just kind of want to get into this. I hear there's money to be made. Let's do it. And there's actually a third one. The third one is they're switching asset classes. So they have done development, they've done investment, they've done lots in other asset classes. Now they're interested in self-storage. So each one of those is kind of handled a little differently. If they are fresh, like they own the parcel of land, sometimes we'll give them a site layout if they get us the pieces and parts that we request from them. We really want to see how invested they are in this dream and this idea. And so I will push back and say, oh, do you have a land survey? Do you know what your unit mix is? What type of storage are you thinking? These are questions oftentimes that they've never actually even thought about or they don't know. And so my next thing is, hey, have you done a market feasibility study? Are you working with a storage consultant? No, you're not. Okay, that is probably the avenue you need to go down to next. And here are a list of resources you can use to start learning more about it. You go to SSA conferences. You go to ISS. There is the SBOA has a great program that you can join in on. AJ Osborne has a great inner circle that you can start gaining knowledge and information from. And so we start giving them these resources of you need to learn.
Yep.
Because if you don't know what you're doing, you're just going to start throwing money everywhere and it's not going to be organized. You're just going to kind of like, hey, let's just see if we can do this. So I try to direct them on the education side of here's where we come into it. When you get to a point where you're real serious about it and we're going to design, let's do it. Let's get your layout put together. Now, if it is an investor or a developer that they've done development before, this is just a new asset class, very similar. A lot of times they have properties that they're just looking at. So we start that same conversation. They're very familiar with market feasibility. Let's say they've been doing hotels or something along those lines. They know that there's market studies out there when they're looking for a new hotel or where to put a new hotel. It's just a different asset class. So they understand that value of, hey, I need to find out where it's going to be most profitable and most equitable for me to build something. And so it's really this conversation of, hey, this is kind of how it's done. This is our process. Until you have at least a schematic design, there's not a whole lot we can do. So if you have a schematic design, we can help you. We can help you with the site layout, but let's make sure we're doing that if you're a little bit closer to actually doing construction. Or Do you just need something roughed up so you can kind of guess or kind of see what your net rentable square footage would be on this piece of property? We'll do a very conceptual layout. Chances are that conceptual layout is going to change 3 or 4 times before it gets to the CDs, but at least gives them something to say, hey, you can probably get about this much rentable square footage. We put it back in their court. They start running numbers.
Gotcha. Do you guys have like a utilization rate that you're like, well, if you have an acre of land, it's let's just say it's a square for argument's sake, right? Like you can get 60 or 70% utilization of that, or I mean, how do you guys?
We do have some numbers that we can. They're very pie in the sky numbers, to be honest with you, because
you never know.
If you go multi-story, if you go climate control with hallways, then you're utilizing less.
Yeah.
Drive aisles and things like
What's
that.
the shape of the property? What are the easements? What are the setbacks?
So we try and maximize the square footage every time we do a square footage of building, every time we do some sort of layout.
I believe Matt Van Horn with Black Swan Advisors, when he does his pro forma, he thinks for climate control, I think it's like 35 to 40% land utilization.
Gotcha.
And then obviously if you're doing RV storage, that's just going to go down because you have such large drive aisles that you have to accommodate for.
For sure.
And then when we are doing that layout, and I want to say how I think this is definitely a value that Forge brings. When we start doing that site layout, we've seen so many layouts. We've seen so many plans. We have an idea of the most efficient way to put buildings on a parcel.
Exactly.
And so we can kind of help guide, like, okay, there's this weird area right here. What can we do with it? And so that's when we like to come into that design phase as well, is that during that site layout. And we offer site layouts as a complimentary service.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So if someone, I mean, obviously you have to have some information for us.
For sure.
What type of storage.
Yeah.
The
few details.
The setbacks, the easements. Like we have to have some information, but if you give us all the information that we need, we can put something together for you in a concept. And like I said, that conceptual layout is a launching point. There's a lot of times that I work with people and they're like, they can't conceptualize how many buildings can I get in this 3 acres.
Right.
And so
our drafting team is actually expanding on our layouts now, where they're doing the 3D stuff.
Yes,
right? We've got a really good young team.
Oh, rad.
And they're excited. They're excited about like some VR capabilities.
Oh, fantastic.
Like
so do like the 3D rendering with VR capability.
They've been doing these 3D renderings, and you can actually like hold it up on your phone and like walk around the building and like see it.
Cool.
It is fantastic. We're going to do some
amazing. A little bit better than
amazing.
the old napkin we used to give.
Yeah. So
all right. So
this is what you got here. You go. But
Yeah.
the way our team's grown and the people that we have for us right now are doing some really innovative,
awesome
stuff.
things.
That's incredible. How else? I mean, that's amazing. How else are you guys growing?
Oh goodness. We have some new products that we're kind of working on, and we're going to be putting that together. A new R&D project that we're working on an alternate design for multi-story buildings. So we're really excited about working on that with one of the local structural engineer firms here in Boise.
Fantastic.
And then, like we talked about our drafting department, one of the things that one of my big projects that I'd like to see by ISS next April is possibly even, what if we could do like when you go through a real estate and you're looking at a home and it's a 3D tour? What if we could do a 3D tour of a multi-story facility that we built? And like at the facility, like VR glasses, and you can walk through it and point things out to people.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I think would just be a phenomenal tool. It's just something exciting to say, hey, we really want to show you what we can do.
We're always working on our efficiencies to make us better too.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Those are well-trained field teams is always the labor in the field. Your building can look beautiful on the back of a truck when it arrives.
No kidding.
But until it gets stood in the air, it's not really beautiful.
That's such a great point.
So,
learning Spanish.
Yeah, we work hard with our field crews.
Yeah.
Training, developing. That's where my background was, in the field. So I know what it takes to build one. I've done every job those field employees have done, from drilling holes to putting insulation in the building. So that is always a key part of our business is the field.
Yeah, and to that, like our project managers are actually taking a Spanish class at Forge. So they meet weekly, they have homework. They're trying to figure out, they're trying to find better ways of communicating with a lot of our our field crews. There was something else that we were
Man, what a great capability in just that alone. You know, I mean, I know you guys get a lot of work in that way, and having that ability, you know, communication wise, is pretty important on a job. You know.
Well, and we're working on hopefully launching Procore as one of the tools that we are using internally.
Yeah, definitely, I paid the bill, so it's coming.
Definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, that's a project in itself. There's a lot that goes into setting that up right. Just like
a project management tool, right?
Yes, it's a construction project management tool. And so that's going to allow us to increase our efficiency and communication, not only internally, but it's also going to allow us to increase our communication and the tools that we provide our customers as well, because it's a gateway. It's a place that we all meet, and all the information is there. And so when I was actually talking with a client that is an owner, and we were telling him like, hey, this is some of the capabilities that we could do. You could log in here and you can see your schedule. You can see the daily logs, and that, I think, that really gives customers peace of mind knowing that they can also see where you're managing some of that project information.
Yeah, it's definitely a strong tool that we hope to, you know, we've also been pretty innovative and put a lot of time and effort into our estimates. I think our estimating's got stronger,
very
than efficient, more efficient than it has been in the past.
Especially our PEMB.
Yeah.
The way we are being able to turn out those estimates very quickly on pre-engineered metal buildings.
I would say
that's a big focus. I think this next 2025, I think we're going to really try to push more of those PEMBs. We're using those hot rolled rigid frames, and maybe I should explain, like a PEMB has the clear span. And so when you're looking at these buildings that have no walls inside and they're tall warehouses and such, oftentimes those are pre-engineered metal buildings. And so they're using hot rolled rigid steel frames, versus a lot of our self-storage that we built is all light gauge framing, which is the less expensive way to go. However, when you're looking at a pre-engineered metal building, if you have that clear span, it gives you so much more flexibility on how you want to break up those units. And so there's a toss-up of, do you want the flexibility? Because we see these PEMBs a lot in the flex space that is kind of growing right now.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, we try and push you in the right direction when we try to help the customer decide this is a better use for your project, or, you know, light gauge or rigid frame building. So.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Well, I know at the beginning we talked a little bit about, you know, people pulling back or not, jumping in or not, kind of a deal. I know from my perspective, all the conversations I've been having, I'm like, man, it's a deal is a deal, and it should work at any point in time. And if there was any time to go, the time is now, because
sounds like you heard that from AJ.
You know, I've
heard him say that
before.
before.
A good deal. Yeah, no, it's definitely one of our themes around here for sure. Because it's, you know, at the end of the day, it's facts. You know, your deal should work whether interest rates are high or low. It should, at the end of the day, pan out. And I know, especially talking to investors, there's a lot of investors that are also just kind of sitting on the sidelines waiting. And from my perspective, you have a lot of, you said about 128%, did you say?
That was from the Yardi report. Yeah. And I just looked from the January of this year to June, and there was a 128% increase of projects that have been abandoned.
That's incredible. And I think
that's just in what, 6 months?
That's not our company.
No,
I'm clarifying that.
Just across the country.
Company. That's just what they're seeing as an industry trend.
Yep, exactly. Well, and two, I mean, what's supply going to look like in the next few years with that massive pullback, right? Supply is going to reduce. Demand is still going to continue to rise. And I would much rather still have the fuel, you know, putting the pedal to the metal, getting projects done, and be able to have a project hitting the market at the time that supply is low, right?
Yeah, so the big guys don't stop.
Exactly.
No, the big guys do not. The
100%. They either kick it up a gear, right?
Yep.
And so there's got to be some rhyme or reason to that. This is where they get their market share back. This is
exactly right.
So yeah, if you've got a project, it's a project. I agree with that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, what are you guys saying?
Well, I am saying, if it makes sense in your mind, there's no reason not to. We all know as soon as you're successful in self-storage, you're doing another one.
Well, and we had, back when that was very volatile with those steel prices, we had the same situation happening where people are like, well, I'm going to see if the prices are going to go down. I'm going to see if the prices are going to go down. And we would just say, listen, you need to go, because what if they go up?
For real.
Like, we don't know what construction prices are going to be. Now, one of the things that I really want to point out, and I was hoping to bring it up, is that when people see that the price of steel, the index in general, is coming down, we'll start getting calls right away. Hey, I see steel's dropping. Is there a change in my proposal? And we have to say, wait, hold up. You have to remember that these manufacturers have to get through all their inventory before they can buy that steel, those coils, at the lesser rate. So we may not see a price decrease. And even if it decreases, it's still up to the manufacturer if they want to decrease it. What if they want to just pad their profit? Like, even though, yes, that we do like to watch what is happening with steel prices, it's really important to understand that there's a lot more to that on an economic level.
Than just an
no
CRU index going up.
The CRU went
happens,
down. Oh, is my price dropped? No, not yet.
Not yet, it might.
Right. That's such an interesting piece, and another piece of gold there that people should know about. Do you have anything else like that? That's, I mean,
I'm trying to pull up.
What charts do we got here?
I have quite a few really great charts. I wanted to talk about the backlog in general, and ABC is the Associated Builders Building Contractors, and so they're an organization that does a lot of analytics. And one of there's four main things that they follow up on every single month. They do what is called the Construction Confidence Index. It's called the CCI. And basically they put out a survey out to these contractors and say, this is a multiple choice. How are you feeling about your sales? How are you feeling about profit margin? How are you feeling about staffing? And so the idea is anything that is above 50 means that they are anticipating growth. If it's at 50, stabilization, below 50, a decline. And so just in like the sales, we are right around where we were in 2023 as far as the confidence of what they think is going to happen with their sales. However, it is trending down a little bit. The same with profit margins. So the idea is if they think that profit margins are good, they're anticipating work's going to continue to come in. The one thing that I found the most interesting when I was doing this was actually the backlog. And so the backlog is basically this concept of, think of it as a savings account. It's all the projects you have on the books that haven't had work completed yet. And so it's money you can count on if those projects are done, completed. And so they do this survey of how many months of backlog do you have? In general, contractors will have 7 to 8 months. That's where it has been over several years. That's the average. What I thought was very interesting when I looked at this is the amount of difference between 2024's backlog and 2023 is about a month. And so what that's indicating to me is that companies are starting to dip into their savings account. So if they are not injecting new contracts, their backlog's going to start going down. Now we're still, our backlog in July was at 8.4 months. So that's in general, if they never got any more work, they could continue working for 8.4 months is the kind of the concept.
Right.
So last year in 2023, we were at 9.3. So to see that that's almost a month difference between 2024 and 2023. And so that's just something that I look at as, okay, if companies in general, contractors in general, are starting to eat out of their savings or their backlog, they're going to start getting more aggressive about getting sales because nobody wants to go negative in their backlog.
Right.
So they're going to get aggressive. So as we are seeing these projects come out, and there's not as many projects bidding right now, all the trades are going to start getting more competitive.
Yep.
And so that's just something that, as I was looking at the analytics this morning of what I already kind of figured just from my own experience, yeah, the numbers are backing that up.
That's fantastic insight. Fantastic insight, for sure. I know there's a lot of people out there that are going to enjoy hearing that. There's going to be some competition. Definitely needed.
And I think that when you get into these tougher economic times, when it was a feast, there were contractors coming out of the woodwork.
Yep.
Lots of one-man shows, lots of local guys. And as these opportunities start becoming more rare or not as plentiful, it's also going to weed out some of that competition. Who's going to make it and who isn't?
Right. Yep. No, that's super important because you don't, that definitely weeds out some of the people who are just really shouldn't be doing it in the first place too. You get a lot of those people that jump into some kind of trades or something when in reality they should not quit their day jobs.
Or they were, let's say, for instance, they were a laborer or something, and they're going to go out and they're like, hey, I can do this. I'm going to start my own business. And running a business is a lot of work.
It is, man. I tell you. No, that's fantastic. With that said, this I think is a fantastic place to wrap it up, and want to appreciate you guys for coming in and spending your time with us today. Where can people connect with you on your services and walking through their projects, so on and so forth?
So our website is forgebuildingswithans.com. And you could always reach out to us at sales@forgebuildings.com.
Fantastic. We'll put those in the show notes below. You guys definitely go check them out. Reach out to Forge, get them on your project. And like Hamish was talking about, the sooner the better, guys.
Right.
With that, thanks a bunch.
Well, fantastic. Thank you, Connor.
You bet.